and we'll kind of work through the rest of them as we go through. Yes? Yeah, thanks. Method, if you watch the video, you heard this, using the square roots method. This is often the easiest way. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, because there's no b, that's the key here, right? If there's a b, if there's like a 2x or a 7x or a 9x or whatever in there, this is not going to work at all. But the fact that b is 0 means this is going to work really well. First thing I'm going to do is subtract 4 from both sides. That's going to give me 5x squared is equal to 17. And then I'm going to divide by 5. I'm going to try to get this squared term by itself. X squared is equal to 17/5. Now, if you watch the video, you know what comes next. What do I need to do now?
You have to do,
Not divide.
sorry.
Square root. Isn't that the way that you want to do a squared? Is you square root. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to square root the left side, and I'm going to square root the right side. And here's where we're in the video again. You saw kind of a new symbol. And here it is. Whenever you square root both sides, you need to put plus or minus with the numerical answer, because the truth is positive root 17/5 squared works and negative square root of 17/5 works. They both work, and so that plus or minus allows us to consider both. So steps 1, what we want to do is we want to isolate what is being squared. Isolate the quantity being squared, and then we square root both sides. When you square root both sides, don't forget the plus or minus, okay? Because both work. We're looking for numbers that make this equation true. The truth is both the plus and the minus work. Okay, how'd that go? Any questions? Okay, I'd like to do a couple more with you here. Number 4 is a good one. So number 4 is a very good one, actually. So if we follow the same kind of steps for number 4, I'd like to get some suggestions from you guys. What do you think we ought to do first?
Subtract 13.
I like it. That's right. Please continue to listen. Subtract 13 from both sides. So when I subtract 13 from both sides, I get 3y squared equals negative 9. And then dividing by 3 would be the very next step. So I get y squared equals negative 3. So far is this making sense? Do you see how this is just like the first one? And really just like the one on the video, I think? What needs to come next? I need to get rid of the squared. How do you get rid of squared?
You square root.
Square root, not by squaring it again. You square root. That's what undoes squared. So what I'm going to do is square root this and square root that. What do you guys think about the square root of negative 3? It's not only that, it's not even real. It's not even a real number. You can't do the square root of a negative number. So what do you think the conclusion is here if we're trying to find a solution and it involves us square rooting a negative number?
Not real number.
Not a real number, therefore there is no real solution. So your conclusion here is that there is no solution to this equation. Say again?
We did square root the other one because it was a fraction.
No, you don't do square root because it's a fraction. So remember, let me erase a couple things here. So when you see the word solve means get the y by itself.
Yeah.
And so when I get to this step right here, y squared equals negative 3, and I look over here and I say, hey, is the y by itself? What would you say?
Yeah.
It's not, though. It's not just y, it's y squared, right? And so if we're trying to get just the y by itself, y squared, it's not quite there yet. So then the question is, how do you get rid of the squared, right? So like if you think back up to here, there was a 3 with the y squared, right? We thought to ourselves, well, how do I get rid of 3? We divide by 3. Here, when you look at that, you say, all right, well, then how do I get rid of squared? You square root.
Wait, so why did we square root the one? The question
You're talking about why didn't we get like an approximation, get like a decimal answer for it? Because it didn't ask us to. You could have. You usually could have. Sometimes.
we squared it, right?
No, we square rooted it.
On the top, the first question.
Say again?
On the first question.
We square rooted. We did not square anything.
Okay.
I can go back through that with you here in a second. So Hosanna, the key is asking yourself, how do I get whatever's being squared, like how do I get it by itself? You've got to get rid of the squared, right?
Yeah.
And the way that you get rid of squared is not by squaring it again, it's by square rooting it. That's the opposite. Okay. You bet. Okay, so number 5, there are a couple of different ways that you could do number 5. But again, I want to encourage you to listen really carefully and think about what's going on here and see how this really is the same, or similar at least, to what we've been doing. So check out number 5. So in all two examples we've done so far, our first couple of steps have involved getting the squared expression by itself, right? The squared expression by itself. Do you see how in number 5, the thing that's being squared is already by itself?
Yes.
Do you see it? Yeah? It's up on the screen. You don't have to be looking at me. Just look at the screen. So since the thing that's being squared is already by itself, really all I have to do here to get the ball rolling is I need to get rid of the squared. How do you get rid of squared? You square root. So I'm going to square root both sides. So squaring the left side gives me this. Squaring the right side gives me that. Wouldn't this cancel with that?
Yes.
That leaves me with 5a minus 2 equals. Now let's not forget that when we square root both sides, the numerical answer over there, the root 3, needs to be plus or minus square root of 3. Okay, so I'm going to go through a couple of steps here, because remember the goal is to get the a by itself, and obviously the a is not by itself right now. So check this out. Should I get rid of the 5 first or the minus 2 first? The minus 2. How do I get rid of minus 2?
Add on both sides.
Add 2 to both sides. Let's make this really easy. Alec, why don't you pick up your chair and go sit by Victoria? And I think we can fix whatever is ailing you. Okay, so here is a really a key step here where some folks will make some mistakes. Check this out. On the right side, sometimes people will look at that and they'll say root 3 plus 2, and they'll say maybe it's like root 5. Aren't you tempted to do that? Remember when we added radicals last chapter? In order to add radicals, don't they have to be like radicals? And do you see how root 3 is a radical, but 2 is not even a radical? So they're not like terms at all. And so there's really nothing to be added there. So here's what you would do. You'd write this right side as 2 plus or minus root 3. They're completely unlike terms, so you can't add those up. You just write it out as 2 plus or minus root 3. And then how would we get rid of the 5? That's right. So I'm going to divide the whole right side by 5. A is equal to 2 plus or minus the square root of 3 over 5. So this is a perfectly acceptable, very good, exact answer. But there might be times when you feel like it or you're asked to approximate this with a decimal. Here's how you could approximate these with a decimal. You'd want to use your calculator, but here's what you could do. One answer would be 2 plus the square root of 3 over 5, and the other one would be 2 minus the square root of 3 over 5. So if you wanted to split it up like that, you could then use your calculator, and in your calculator you go 2 plus the square root of 3, get an answer for that, and then divide by 5, and then do 2 minus the square root of 3, and get an answer for that, and then divide that by 5. Does that make sense? Why don't you guys take a minute and do that on your calculator? See if you can execute that through, and we'll see how it all goes. Check your answers here in just a second. Jake, go ahead, check here. I would say for this top one, if you use your calculator here, this is probably, about 0.7-ish? Give me maybe to the 100th place.
Wait, what?
It was like
I got 2.35.
it was 0.746.
What did you do?
I did what you put it.
Well, I did that too, and I
You
got
do 2 plus root 3 equal, and then divide it by 5.
That's what I did, and I got 2.35.
Wow.
So, Grace, can I explain it in a second?
Yes.
Hey guys, listen please. Hey, listen please. And then this over here, let's see here, 2.4. I would guess that that's probably about, 0.08? What do you guys get for the other one?
I got 1.65.
0.06? Okay.
What are you, I don't know.
I got 0.05.
Hey guys, listen up. Let me help you. Hey, this will be on a video. You'll see this here in just a second, or later on if you want to on a video. Let me show you. This is when we can call this part lies that my calculator told me. So check this out. Remember the first one was 2 plus root 3 over 5?
Yes.
You need to know how to talk to your calculator. So if you put this in 2 plus square root of 3 over 5. Your calculator is very good at order of operations. In fact, I would say your calculator is perfect at order of operations. It will do exactly what you tell it to do. Do you know what you've told it to do here?
The square root of 3 divided by 5, then plus 2.
Yes. So this will give you a wrong answer based on our question. Here's how you can do this. You could put the 2 plus root 3 in parentheses. And when you do this, and then divide by 5, look at this. Now what you're saying is do the numerator first, which makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And then divide by 5. Hey, there we go.
Oh.
Here is yet another way. Check this out. You could go 2, Grace, check it out. 2 plus root 3. You could do this and just hit enter and get a number and then say now divided by 5. This will give you the same correct answer. So you want to be super careful with that. The other one, let's double check that answer. It was 2 minus square root of 3. And then that answer divided by 5, that's that 0.06. Yeah, 0.05 is what it should be. 0.0535. Okay? So make sure you're being really careful. This is where you need to know how to talk to your calculator, frankly. That's kind of it. Okay, guys, I think we've got one last question here. Number 6. This will close off our day. If you would. Guys, I want to hear some suggestions from you.
You have to add 5 on both sides.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Grace kind of jumped right in there. She's right. We want to add 5 to both sides. So when I add 5 to both sides, I get x plus 3 squared. Grace, slow down just a little bit. Equals 63. Now remember, I want you to get this. The goal is you want to get the stuff that's being squared, you want to get it by itself. And do you see how the quantity that's being squared is now by itself? How do you get rid of the squared now? That's right. You square root both sides. And when I do that, I get x plus 3 because the square root and the squared canceled each other out. Equals, what's the new symbol? Plus or minus. Let's be really careful. Sometimes people will accidentally call that plus and minus. And there's no way that a number can be plus and minus. Because a number is either positive, negative, or 0. It's plus or minus. Or is very different than and, right? Like if I told you, hey, you can have a hamburger or a milkshake, you're going to be like, which one do I like better? Or if I said you can have a hamburger and a milkshake, that's very different. You're like, yes, I will take both. That makes sense? So and versus or is very different. It's plus or minus. And it's the square root of 63. So then what would be my final step to get the x all the way by itself? Minus 3. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. Let's remember that one little trap that sometimes will get people. Sometimes people will be like, cool, 63 minus 3 is 0. But remember, it's not 63 minus anything. It's root 63. So, right. So I'm going to write this as negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 63.
Yes.
To me, that's the more comfortable way of writing it. That is a perfectly acceptable answer. In fact, it's exact. It's perfect. It's beautiful. If you wanted to write this out using a decimal approximation, you could write it out as negative 3 plus root 63 or negative 3 minus root 63. And I'm guessing the first one is slightly less than 8.
Yes, 7.9.
Right? And then the other one would be slightly less than 11. Or negative 11, sorry. Slightly more than negative 11. So, Emily, what'd you get?
Well, for the first one, I got 4.9.
Yeah, that's
all I got.
Well, so what I'm thinking is the square root of 64. Oh, yeah. Square root of 64 is 8. So square root of 63 is almost 8. So negative 3 plus that. Yeah, so 4 point something?
4.9.
4.9. 4.93.
But you only have to do 4.9.
I didn't tell us how many decimals we had to go to.
Yeah, but
On
why
a,
would you do more?
on a quiz or test, I'll be specific. I'll say, please round to the nearest hundredth.
It makes no difference.
Yes, it does.
Guys, if it's
Grace, it'll make a difference to me if I ask you to round to the hundredths and you round to the tenths. It'll make a difference to me and you.
yes, but I mean for now, like 4.93, it doesn't matter if you put the 3 there because it doesn't round the 9 up.
We'll talk about that later. And the other one is like negative 10 point something? Or negative,
What?
sounds about right. Okay, so guys, you got about a 15-minute video here.
What?
If you need some help, if you want to go back and watch any parts of
I thought you
this,
meant the
you're welcome
intro
to.
video is 15 minutes.